name's John Silverman. I'm managing partner of NAI Partners, and I want to welcome everybody here tonight on behalf of the 100 plus employees and agents with NAI Partners. Welcome to our 2017 economic forecast event that we now have had 4 or 5 years in a row, and we're glad to do it again. A couple of quick things. For those of you that don't know NAI Partners, we're a 100-plus commercial real estate service company. We have offices in Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. We are a full-service firm with specialties in office, industrial, retail brokerage, landlord leasing, tenant representation, investment sales. We have a property management business, a construction management business, and we also now have a fund, not fun, but fund business where we're investing our money and other people's money in real estate. You know, I sort of had some prepared remarks, and they don't want me to speak for very long. Sorry, Travis. But I did want to say that I was thinking about on the way over here, could I say anything remotely interesting? And I think the one thing that comes to mind about 2017, at least for all of us as a city, and for us, some of us individually who may have been impacted by the flood, is that Houston and Houstonians are a pretty resilient bunch of people. You know, in 2016, all of us suffered from the oil and gas downturn, and the rebound this year has been incredible. Not just a lot of people I'm talking to are doing really well, and the economic rebound and the rebound in their businesses has been pretty incredible. And so, to me, that's kind of the story of 2017. It's been an interesting couple of years, and we're still here and we're doing well, and I think Houston's on a great track again to have a lot of good prosperity in the next few years. A couple of other things in 2017, I just wanted to mention. I mentioned our investment fund, and we placed somewhere around $30 million worth of acquisitions that we did in 2017, and we're looking to do a lot more of that next year and beyond. I know we have some clients here. We have friends, we have clients, we have a different mix of folks, but certainly to those of you who are clients of NAI Partners, I want to thank you for coming and thank you for being clients. Without clients, none of us would be in business, so we're always grateful to have folks that are willing to put their trust, their real estate needs with us. And if you're here and you're not a client yet, then we'd like to make you one. I did want to thank, I'm going to introduce Ray Driver here in a second. Kinghorn Driver and Huff is our sponsor this evening, and so we're glad to have you guys here and sponsoring this event with us. So in order to keep it short, Travis. Does everybody know Travis? Where's Travis? Okay. So I want to recognize Travis because before I came up here, he told me I have to keep it short. Thank you, Travis. All right, Ray Driver, come on up, Ray. Ray runs Kinghorn Driver and Huff, which is our sponsor, and Ray's going to say a few words and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, John. John, appreciate it very much, and thanks for having us here. We're really are honored to be a sponsor this year. We were involved last year, and it's great to see so many friends out there that we know. Friendly faces. Met a lot of new people that I don't know, and glad to meet them. And just want to say I am so glad that NAI and Randy and Travis figured out 6 months in advance that the Astros would not be playing tonight. And I don't know how you guys had figured that out, but I want to know, can we beat these guys the next 2 nights? We've been to most of every game, and it's going to be kind of relief when it's over with, but I'd rather just make it one more week instead of tomorrow night. So on behalf of all the folks at Kinghorn Driver and company here in Houston, and we want to thank NAI for letting us be sponsor, and we really want to thank Larry and Travis and especially Brianne in my office. They did a lot of work behind the scenes to get everybody here, and it takes a lot just to put a program like this together. Man, yeah, let's give them a hand. Many of you know that we're a mortgage banking and full-service financial services company, and we're part of Q10 Capital. And Q10 Capital has numerous offices across the United States. We service loans almost $11.3 billion. And our office here is pretty old. It was founded in 1945. I was not there, and we're the oldest independently owned mortgage company in the state of Texas. There's a little more information. They put together a great brochure. It kind of talks about both companies, and if they're on your desk, please read a little bit about both companies and take them with you. And you guys did a fabulous job putting that together. A lot of times people put these big packages together and they take them home and they throw them in the trash. So we have a small little item here that you can take home and get a little more educated about what we do. We do all types of financing. We place debt and equity and joint ventures and construction, permanent financing. And we use hundreds of capital providers. Use life companies. We go through Wall Street, work with local and regional banks. And we're pleased to have a number of our existing clients in the audience, and we're very happy that they're here to join us tonight. And KDH Gold has always been to provide the best financial solutions and build strong relationships throughout the industry. And that doesn't happen without a great staff that we have on our production team. Many of them are here in the audience. So will you guys please raise your hand or something, stand up and reach out to them, and meet them. We're fortunate that we're fortunate we have a couple of guests of ours that just happen to be in town. A couple of our lenders. One is Dean Newsel from Thriving Financial, and he is somewhere in the audience. They're a great life company along with Symetra, and so we also have Doug Clyde here from Seattle, and if you guys get a chance to meet them, I think it would be worth your while. And so over the years, we've had excellent success working with NAI, and as John had talked about, providing capital solutions for their clients. And I think we can speak for both NAI and KDH, say thank you to the number of existing clients that we have here in the audience and any future clients, hopefully, that we'll make tonight. And for their trust and confidence in us, and you provided to us. Successful relationships are built on integrity and trust, and both companies are totally committed to that. And with that, I would like to move on to introduce Dr. Dotzour. I've got this long introduction about Dr. Dotzour, and I had a chance to visit with him before the program got started. I would say that I've heard Mark speak probably maybe 25, 30 times, and I have always said that he is the best of the best. He's one of the most informed gentlemen, entertaining, and I've got this long resume of things that I can read about him. Mark, would you like for me to read all that stuff? Okay. He's famous. Most of you know that he was at Texas A&M for many more, at their real estate center for many years. He's made thousands of presentations. He's spoken to thousands of groups. His clients are all different kind of banks, institutions, and to whatever. He told me that he does at least 70 events a year as an average. Mark, is that pretty close? And they're leaving here and heading to California and doing an event, and then coming back here and doing an event in Austin, So it never stops for Mark Dotzour. Please welcome him. I'm so glad he's here.
Thank you, Ray. It's great to be here today. I love being in Houston. If this is one of your first times to be in Houston, I used to write blogs for the Real Estate Center. I wrote 200 blogs in about 2 years, and I remember, I'll never forget one of the titles. I wrote, Houston is a beast, and Houston is a beast. And by that, I mean, it's one of the few towns, cities in America that can still compete in a global economy, heads up, mono e mono. And I'm fascinated with it. It's cool. We can compete from here with Korea, with China, South America, Europe, you name it. And people are asking me, say, well, hey, could you come to Ardell in Philly because that hurricane in Houston, I bet you they're going to cancel all the events there. And I was trying to be as pleasant as possible, and I just said, I don't think you get it down here. We got a lot of money in this town, and we got a lot of people that are interested in moving ahead, and they don't take no for an answer. So I don't guess anybody's going to be canceling any presentations that I'm going to be giving. So I'm thrilled to death to be here. It's good to be here. It's good to be in this town. The title of my presentation is Approaching the Red Line, and I came up with this the day after the presidential election. Some of you, I'm going to have to talk about politics for a little bit, even though I think it's disgusting to talk about. I'm going to talk about federal policy mainly. I'm not interested in politics. For those of you that never heard me speak before, I was born in Kansas. They don't have Democrats in Kansas. But I changed parties about 7 years ago and became a registered cynic. I don't believe any of them. And in the last 2 years, I've gone from that to not only do I not believe them, I don't like them. I don't like Democrats or Republicans at the national level. I hope we never get bipartisanship again. I hope they just shut the whole place down and bring all the money back and give it to the governors and the mayors who actually know what to do. Those people actually know what to do. They work for a living. They've worked for a living in the past, and these politicians obviously view themselves as unemployable because they'll say, oh, I couldn't do that because if I did, I wouldn't get reelected. And I'm thinking, hey, what's the big deal with that? You could just get a real job, right? Here's what I saw. I don't like Donald Trump. I don't like his opponent. I don't like anybody in Washington, D.C., honest with you. But here's what happened. When I got in the booth, if you're from Texas, you know this. If you're not, we had 3 choices, and I voted for Gary. And I don't even know who Gary is. I couldn't tell you who his last name was. I was hoping Pee Wee Herman would be on the list or Mickey Mouse, but I know those guys. So I'm not a Trump fan. I'm going to say a couple of positive things about Donald Trump, and I know that's totally illegal in America right now, especially if you're on Facebook. Ask me about social media. I don't do any of it. I don't do any of that anti-social media stuff. Twitter, Facebook, all the rest of that stuff. I'm just not into that. But here's what I saw. Like it or not, I was overwhelmed by the euphoria that I saw in the business community when Donald Trump was elected. I didn't expect to see it. It was a surprise to me. I'm 63. I don't get surprised all that much anymore. I was surprised. And I go to green states. See, I know a lot about politics, don't I? I go to blue states, I go to red states, I go to purple states, and it didn't matter. There was 100%. My observation was every businessman and woman in this country was giddily euphoric about that election because they thought they were going to reduce regulation and also cut taxes and build $1 trillion worth of bridges or so. And at that point in time, that's when I came up with this theme. And my wife, one morning, she goes, you know, I'm not sure I know exactly what a red line is. And I thought if she doesn't, maybe other people don't. So I went to the Urban Dictionary and found this online. It's a set of RPMs which your engine can put out before you pretty much blow it up. That's what I thought Donald Trump might do to the U.S. economy because, like it or not, Donald Trump could be called Mr. Fiscal Policy. When I went to UT in the PhD program to let off some steam, all the guys, there weren't any ladies in there at that point. There's like 6 or 8 of us guys. We'd go see All-Star Wrestling down in Austin, and I loved that place. And Kamala, the Ugandan giant, was my favorite, and Colonel Mustafa was his manager. Well, if I could have Donald Trump, I would put him in red, white, and blue spandex, and I would call him Mr. Fiscal Policy, and I would be his manager, Colonel Mustafa. Like it or not, that guy knows fiscal policy. I'm going to get into that in a minute. Why am I saying this? I'm going to hit 3 things tonight. When I'm around people that are in commercial real estate, I find, like the gentleman said, I've done this for 18 years now, close to 1,600 of these presentations. I'm always talking about 3 things. Are my buildings going to fill up? Is my cost of borrowing going to go up or down? And what's the likely trend on the value of my buildings? Everything I talk about tonight for the 45 minutes we got here is going to be tied into those 3 things. I had been mentioning the red line to me was that we're in a full employment situation, and if Donald Trump can do everything he says, we might actually have real inflation for the first time in like 35 years. And interest rates might start to go up. And it's possible that cap rates might go up a little bit. Just for full disclosure, my 403B is with TIAA CREF, and I have something like a 77% allocation to their commercial real estate portfolio, and that's down from 80-something where I've been since 2004. So trust me, I have a real interest in commercial real estate value trends aside from just making presentations like this. So I was thinking, wow, okay, Donald Trump, if he does this stuff, we might see some inflation in the future. I've been telling people since 2008 when people were worried about runaway inflation because the Fed was going to print $4 trillion, all that stuff. And at that time I was saying, look, if you're worried about runaway inflation, I would recommend you just take cocaine instead because at least you'll feel good before it kills you. And I remember making that comment in Houston with the dean of the business school there at that time, and his eyes were about like silver dollars. So I had to say that's not an official position of Texas A&M University. But now I don't work there, and frankly, I don't care what the official position is at Texas A&M University. It's a wonderful school. I love my job, and anyhow, they were wonderful to me. This is what the economy looked like to me in '06. That dragster is powerful, but it's not supposed to be on fire. That's what happens when you put fuel in there that's not designed to be there to make it do some tricks that it really doesn't want to do. And what that was a nice Republican president at that point in time when we decided to make 107% loans to people to buy homes without verifying that they have a job or credit, period. And people are asking me in '06, early '07, what do you think about this? And I said, well, it sounds like a grand social experiment to me. It's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. Well, in my mind, this is how it turned out. And we all know that. I don't need to talk about that in more detail because I want to get to this next slide. A year later, this is what our economy looked like. And this is when Ben Bernanke was begging Congress for fiscal policy. And unfortunately, I don't think Congress really knows what fiscal policy is. You hear about people say, my presidential candidate creates jobs. No, my presidential candidate creates jobs. I got news for you. No president ever creates any jobs. I mean, they can create fake jobs working for the federal government. But I'm talking about real jobs where you compete in a global economy. And so, you know who creates jobs in this country? That would be you in this audience that own a business. And fiscal policy is simply a matter of a president and Congress saying things to encourage you to hire people. Pardon me. And so we just didn't have that. And so because of that, fiscal policy was not part of Washington, D.C. calculus for years. And so what we had was a poor substitute called monetary policy where Ben Bernanke took his interest rate down to 0, then started buying bonds, skipped mortgage rates below 4. It's called the wealth effect. Google it. Don't believe a word I say. I got a beard. I went to UT. I work at A&M, so I don't expect you to believe a word I say. Google it yourself. Ben Bernanke wealth effect. What was Ben Bernanke doing? He was lowering interest rates down to 0 to make stocks go up, bonds go up, and real estate go up to make rich people richer with the idea then that they'll buy something. And it worked. And so that wealth disparity is the end result of lack of fiscal policy in Washington and the result of monetary policy in Washington. And now we don't need the fiscal policy anymore, because as we got into the last year before the election, this is what I saw our economy doing. It was strong, creating jobs. There was a labor shortage. Wages were increasing at an increasing rate, and that can lead to higher inflation. And that would be a new message for me to walk into a group like this and say, I think inflation's going to go up, and I think interest rates on your borrowing costs are going to go up, and cap rates may go up with it. This is where we were before the election. Here's the good news for you, gang. Our economy was growing 2% a year, which was kind of sluggish. But the fact of the matter is it was going up 2% a year without Washington, D.C., period. And so to me, if you want to ask me, it's like, what if they shut down Washington, D.C. for a week or two? I'd say, good. That'd be fine with me. We don't need them. Men and women in this country are the people that hire people. I was getting kind of interesting looks from people all last year when I was saying we had a labor shortage in this country. I'd say, we got a labor shortage in this country, and people would look at me like, hey, we got a problem in this country. The unemployment rate is high, and the labor force participation rate is declining. And I saw Wolf Blitzer say something like that. Well, let me tell you something. If you're watching Fox, CNN, MSNBC, or ABC, or NBC, or heaven forbid your Facebook for news, I got news for you. More than 7 minutes a day, not only are you wasting your time, but you're causing yourself emotional damage in the process. And what I've seen since the first of this year is that if you get any kind of news from those outlets I just mentioned, you're in jeopardy of making bad decisions for your clients. Because what you're seeing in the national media is nothing compared to the euphoria that's being felt in the business community. You all are in it, you know it. I haven't run into anybody that said, oh, man, every client I got is just moping around. They're not doing anything. This country's on fire right now, and if you just watch TV, you would think we're about ready to completely go off the face of the earth. The fact of the matter is, this chart, every month I update this. When I first started it 2 years ago, it was 4.1 million jobs open. Today, it's 6.1 million jobs. We've got jobs all over this country that need to be filled, and we need legal immigration, too. It'd be awesome if we actually had a president and a Congress that would create an environment where you could immigrate to America legally and you wouldn't have to be afraid or anything else, and you participate in this economy. And for the life of me, I don't understand why Republicans and Democrats for most of my life have chosen never to address that. But we're going to deal with this labor shortage. We're not going to be able to get by without skilled workers coming here from somewhere else. My impression is that's not a popular point of view right now. Most people that even comment to me about that say, hey, pal, I'm not interested in immigration, legal or otherwise, okay? Well, that's fine. It's just going to be interesting to see how all of the restaurants get by, how the home builders get by, how the hotels get by, all of those workers. Our economy is strong. Our economy is continuing to grow at a moderate pace. This economy is in the 9th year of the economic expansion this time around, and the longest since World War II is 10 years. So that's why people started asking me a year ago, hey, what inning are we in? We're getting kind of late in the game. I thought maybe we were in the 6th or 7th inning in 2016. This looks like it's going to go for a longer period of time. This may become the longest economic expansion in our post-war era, and I'll show you some charts to talk about that. So then you'll hear news about the Fed's going to raise rates. And boy, when they do, it's going to crush the housing market because mortgage rates will go up, and it's going to raise cap rates, and it's going to hit commercial real estate buildings. I don't believe that for a minute. Keep in mind that Ben Bernanke and now Sheila Bair, and before them, Alan Greenspan, they only control a loan from one big bank to another for 24 hours, and they have zero control over the 10-year Treasury. And the 10-year Treasury, for us troops in the commercial real estate business, is what we need to know. And the 10-year Treasury is going down as the short rate is going up. I heard Alan Greenspan actually cuss on TV once, and Fed chairmen never do that in public because everything they say has to be approved by governmental affairs and their communications people. The 4-letter word I heard him say in 2004 was conundrum. When you hear Alan say, this is a conundrum, that's fighting words. You don't want to ask him because you might get punched at that point. The conundrum was he wanted to raise the whole rate structure. So he's starting to raise his one-day rate, and what happens? The 10-year starts going down, and that was his conundrum. He found out he wasn't omnipotent, and he didn't like it very much. Our current Fed chair, Janet Yellen, is finding out the same thing, raising the one-day rate, 10 years going down. Now, with that said, what are these characters up to at the Fed? They're trying to normalize interest rates on the one-day rate that may have no impact whatsoever on cap rates for real estate. What does a normalized rate mean? When you're down to zero, that's called accommodative. Everybody, at least in theory, wants to borrow money at zero. The opposite of accommodative doesn't even have a name. Punitive, terrible, I don't know, it doesn't even have a name. It's so high that you throw everybody out of business and you have a huge recession like we had in anybody remember that from 1982? Anybody besides me will admit you were in business? Thank you. You're a handsome man. This guys with white hair got to stick together. We were both 8 when it happened. Okay? So somewhere between way up here and accommodative is a normal rate or a neutral rate. And they're just trying to, I've read a lot about Janet Yellen. I read her papers. That's how you find out what Fed chairmen do, is by reading their papers, because they think about this stuff. They publish the papers. And the bottom line, I'll just summarize for you, is how high would she like it to go up from 0 to about 2.5? I think that's the whole goal. If she could snap her fingers tomorrow and get the Fed funds rate, it's probably about a 1.25 right now. I don't pay that much attention to it anymore because I just feel like I know what's going on there. I don't even need to pay much attention. But if she could get that rate up to 2.5, she would just say, that's good. There's no inflation. Fed chairmen have to say, we want to raise rates because we're worried about inflation. Well, nobody's worried about inflation, and they're raising rates anyhow. So what about this normal rate or this neutral rate? I love this quote Alan Greenspan made in 2005. This was back in his conundrum days because he was raising rates. Somebody asked him about that neutral rate of interest. Where do you get there? And I mentioned to you, Janet Yellen right now is trying to get to 2.5. When Greenspan was asked about that, he goes, it's very difficult to know where that so-called neutral rate is, but we'll probably know it when we are there, because we will observe a certain degree of balance which we had not perceived before, which would suggest that we're somewhere very close to where that is. That's how you train to be chairman of the Fed, is to say that out loud without laughing, okay? I mean, you know what that really says? That really says, to be honest with you, I don't have a clue where the neutral rate is. We will just raise it until something goes wrong and we'll know we did too much, and then we'll start lowering it. It's kind of interesting how these people work. And this is why they don't just raise it overnight to 2.5, because they made a mistake in 1987, and these people know their history good. I love history. I read it too. I enjoy the Fed. I read their stuff too. My clients are interested in it. Here's where last time they got too carried away. In 1987, they raised rates about 6 times. Not these puny 0.25% deals, but some halves in there, a couple of halves and some quarters. And all of a sudden, the Dow fell 22.5% in one day. That would be, you wake up in the morning paper, the Chronicle says the Dow fell 4,500 points yesterday. This is what the Fed doesn't want to have happen, so that's why you're seeing it. We're talking about raising it 1/4. Look over our shoulder, see if the market's okay. A month later, we raise it 1/4, wait a little bit, see if the market's all right. Talk about it, raise it, talk about it, raise it, until they try to get up to 2.5. What if they do get up to 2.5? Does that necessarily mean that the 10-year rate's going to go up? Does that mean the cap rates are going to go up? The answer to that is no. The only thing, if you don't come away with anything else except how cool NAI is, okay? if you don't come away with anything else than that, the one thing that drives the 10-year Treasury up, and the one thing only, is the expectation of future inflation from the global bond investment community. And right now, nobody's expecting inflation except the 10 people out of 15,000 that have come up to me this year and asked me how to buy Bitcoin. If you have a client that's asking you about buying Bitcoin, that means they've already bought all the gold they need, and they've already bought a deed to a lot in Idaho for a bomb shelter. They haven't built the house yet. They're worried about runaway inflation, okay? Aside from those 10 people, virtually nobody else is worried about inflation right now. Let me talk about fiscal policy a little bit, because our economy has a lot of strength left. And the coolest part of that is, and the funnest part of it is for Houston, is the oil and gas business is turning the corner. The oil and gas business is getting mean and lean. And the oil and gas business is about to put Saudi Arabia out of business. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, because any of you remember the concept of a black swan? That's like, what's your black swan? It's like, what weird thing that has no chance of happening? What would bother you and make you stay up at night? I haven't had a black swan since 2006, when I found out that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac weren't filing quarterly returns with the SEC, and nobody was talking about it. And I found out they should have been delisted from the New York Stock Exchange, and nobody was talking about that either. That was the last time I was telling people, I don't know what's going on here, but all I know is this is not good. I don't know why it's not good. I'm telling you, it's not good. I haven't had a black swan since then, until about 4 or 5 months ago, and it has to do with oil. So I'm going to get there before this evening is out. Apartments, it feels like apartments are coming up everywhere. But the fact of the matter is, there is just a whole bunch of people that would like to be buying houses that got suckered into these student loans. It's just a travesty. These people have borrowed so much. We need truth in education. If you're on the board of regents of some university, ask them about truth in education. It's like, hey, before we loan these people $40,000, we should show them what their expected salary is. I mean, go ahead and get your degree in Russian archaeology. Just don't borrow $80,000 to do it. You're never going to pay it off. You will be a slave to that bond holder for the rest of your life. These people at the university should tell you that sort of thing before you do it. Bottom line is, there's a lot of people that might like to buy a house. They're getting to the age where they buy a house, but they're straddled with these things, and they're not going away anytime soon. Now, let me talk about Donald Trump in spandex, fiscal policy here. Mr. Fiscal Policy. There's a whole bunch of stuff. That guy, I don't like what he does at all. I can tell you that. But what I like and what I don't like is meaningless. What I'm talking about is what might affect business, that might affect your clients and my clients, and their psychology and their perceptions. The euphoria of a Donald Trump election came not from his hairstyle, but the idea that he could reduce regulation for a lot of businesses. Whether you know it or not, and you do, there is a whole bunch of businesses in this country that have felt like they're under the oppression of government regulation from Washington, D.C., and they're absolutely sick of it. And people just went off the reservation, off the chart when that happened. And so here's what the media was saying. Donald Trump's going to create a lot of jobs because he's going to cut taxes for businesses. He's going to cut personal taxes, and he's going to build $1 trillion worth of bridges. Do you remember when the 10-year Treasury started going up the day after the election, and it went up for about 3 months? That's because all the people at Goldman Sachs and MIT graduates were saying, oh yeah, this is all going to be inflationary when all this happens. And that's where I started thinking about the red line issue and the possibility of inflation. And then it dawned on me about February, it's like, wait a minute, what happened here? You know what? Donald Trump can't build one bridge unless he pays for it out of his pocket. Donald Trump can't cut taxes for individuals unless he can pay for it. And Donald Trump can't cut taxes for corporations and businesses unless he pays for it. And then the question, see, people just forgot about Congress. It's just weird. And so the 10-year Treasury's moving up toward 3. I had been saying if I had to bet right now between the 10-year being at 3 or the 10-year being at 2, I would definitely vote for the 2. And so as it was going up to 3, I thought, well, okay, 50-50 chance. I'm an economist, means 50-50 chance anything I say is wrong, and everybody understands that. But the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump isn't going to build one bridge unless Congress approves it. And he's not going to cut taxes for businesses or individuals until Congress approves it. I didn't see this part happening here where the healthcare thing came up first, but if you think it's hard to do healthcare, it's going to be way harder to do tax reform. And I'll explain why in a minute. Bottom line is he has to pay for it, and there's two ways they're talking about paying for it. And one is border adjustments. How many people in this room are in favor of a border adjustment? Anybody? I've seen 5 people out of 12,000. The last one, I was the first. The last one I saw was in Vegas, and that guy raised his hand, kept his head down like, don't hit me, okay? Americans are not in favor of a border adjustment because it would make the price of their TVs go up. If you make a TV in Des Moines, Iowa instead of Singapore somewhere, it's going to cost you more money. And I think that's the number one priority for Americans is continuous availability of cheap TVs. We value that more than virtually anything else. Because we have 7 of them, and my gosh, it costs you a lot if you had to pay more for it. So nobody's in favor of the border adjustment. Donald Trump's not in favor of the border adjustment because he said it was too complicated. So what's left? If you don't do the border adjustment, what's left? Get rid of the loopholes. Now, I hang around the real estate industry a ton. I really enjoy it when I'm speaking at a large NAR audience. I think I've actually been banned by NAR recently, but I think they're hiring me to come back in April. You think NAR is going to say, hey, that's fine with us, let's get rid of the mortgage interest deduction? Do you think home builders, how about commercial realtors, you guys and gals going to get in line to get rid of the 1031 exchange? Probably not. How about all our well-meaning friends out in California? Well, this would be New York from where I'm looking, I think. All our well-meaning friends in New York and all of our well-meaning friends in California, they seem like they don't mind high taxes. They talk like they don't mind it anyhow. And so do you think they're going to decide, you know what, we pay a whole lot in state income taxes and local income taxes at the city level, and we've been getting to deduct that off our income taxes, but we're okay with that. You can take away our loophole. You think they're going to do that? The answer is probably no. So there goes all of California and all of New York right off the bat. Who's going to get rid of the loopholes? And the answer to that is we don't. That's what Americans like even more than continuous access to cheap TVs is our loophole, whatever that might be. If you're a farmer, whoever it might be. If you're a retiree, it'd be your Social Security check. If you want to read all about this so that you can confirm that I'm not making this up, this is the most boring book I ever read. You can get it for like $3 on eBay with no shipping. I think 2 people might have read it. This is a blow-by-blow account of the 1986 Tax Reform Act. Was there anybody in the room that wants to be willing to admit they were in the business in '86 when that happened? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, we are pioneers in the business. Still are pioneers in the business. Yeah, it's 31 years ago. And you know what? Ronald Reagan only got half of the job done. He got my favorite half done. He lowered my income tax rate, personal. But he didn't get the other half done. He couldn't cut the spending or get rid of the loopholes either. Did the mortgage interest deduction go away? Or the 1031? Or did municipal bond finance exemptions, did those go away? Or did New York and California have to stop deducting their income taxes? No, the answer is none of that happened. Ronald Reagan, as charismatic as he was, couldn't get it done either. This character is not as charismatic as Ronald Reagan. I know you may not know that, but just my own opinion. And he's not going to get it done either. So my hypothesis, now I'm talking about cap rates, and I'm talking about mortgage lending, because people are worried. The reason rates started to go up is because people said when Trump does all this stuff, it's going to be inflationary. And my hypothesis is Trump isn't going to do any of this stuff. He's not going to cut corporate taxes. He's not going to cut individual taxes, and he's not going to build one bridge unless he can get Congress to figure out how to pay for it. And that's hard to do. Read that book. It's hard to do. You know how they sunk the tax cut issue, the spending cut issue early? Read that book. It was an initial coalition of the people from California and the people from New York who wanted to deduct their taxes, and the oil and gas business from Texas. You put those three groups together into one little package, and you've got all the Texas votes, you've got all the New York votes, you've got all the California votes, and that's pretty much all you need to sink any tax reform, period. So if we wake up tomorrow and we find out that the people of New York said, yes, we're willing to get rid of our loophole, and the people in California go, for our brothers and sisters in New York, we feel your pain. You can get rid of our loophole too. And then when the oil and gas business says, you know what, the tax preferences for that, if we find that that's happening, I will come back tomorrow night and say, we're going to have tax reform and interest rates could go up. Likelihood of that is really low. So let me mention something to you about inflation, because a lot of people have been worried about it. I wanted to get it down to the meat and potatoes of this because I own commercial real estate, and I don't really want to be long, heavy in commercial real estate when cap rates go up. And I mentioned to you the only reason that cap rates go up is inflation. And I have another chart I was going to put in, but I don't have quite enough time for that. We have had inflation in this country for the last 100 years from two sources, either war or an oil shock. We had inflation in World War I, we had inflation in World War II and Korea, and then we had oil shocks in the 70s. That's where our inflation went. And so these black boxes here is the average rate of inflation for each decade, which you can see there on the left. The average inflation in 1950s was 2%, and then 2% in the 60s. And then 7% in the 70s, 5% in the 80s, and then 3%, 2%, and 1%. You see, we just don't really do runaway inflation in this country. The big inflation, if you want to get down to push comes to shove, we have had significant inflation in this country going back 67 years. We've had 8 years of high inflation, and it started in 1974, and it ended in 1982. The blue line is the price of oil. You see that oil embargo box there? That doesn't look like a whole lot, but the price of oil quadrupled, went from $1 to $4. Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, stood up to the oil company and said, I'm not selling to you $1 anymore. Today, it's $4. Capiche? That's the only Arabic I know, so don't start speaking to me in Arabic. I don't know. It's the only one I know. Went to $4. What happens when oil goes to $4 and then stays there? It doesn't matter if it goes to 100 and then goes back to 30. It goes there and stays there. Well, then all of a sudden, everything that's polyester gets expensive. All the clothes that I own got really expensive. The price of transporting my favorite food, Hostess Twinkies, got expensive because of the trucks and the money that they have to spend on fuel and stuff. That was inflationary in 74, and then 5 years later in 79, the Iranian people overthrew the Shah and put the Ayatollah in place. And at that point in time, Iran was one of the biggest oil producers on earth. It and Saudi Arabia were the big producers. And after the Shah was overthrown, Iranian oil production dropped off dramatically. And that's when we had this second oil shock in 1979. See how it jumped? That's to $40, gang. So in a matter of from 1974 to 1980, oil went from $1 to $40. That's when we had inflation, and it pretty much stayed there for a while. When did inflation go away? Why do I say it went away in 1982? One of the last people that I really thought was cool in Washington was Fed Chairman Paul Volcker. That dude was tall, smoked cigars. He walks in and goes, yeah, we got some inflation here. No problem, baby. We can do this. How you going to do it, Paul? I'll raise interest rates until I drive everybody into bankruptcy. It'll work. It'll work. Anybody remember that time? Mortgage rates. I had a personal loan outstanding, started at 11. By the time I paid it off, it was 14, on their way up to 20%. When you raise interest rates to 20%, you get rid of inflation in a hurry. How long has it been now? 1982? That's 35 years ago. We haven't had any inflation since. And when Janet Yellen gets worried about inflation, this is the chart she looks at, University of Michigan, Inflation Expectation Survey. What this shows me is that nobody expects higher inflation, period. We have a global surplus of everything. We got too many tire companies, we got too many this, we got too many that. And when you have a surplus of stuff, it's hard to get pricing going. We have a surplus of labor in the world. We have a labor shortage in America, but there's no shortage of workers in many parts of the rest of this globe. So when we get a little fussy here in America and go on strike, what happens is the company says, hey, make my day. Go ahead and go on strike because I've been wanting to move this plant to Mexico for like 2 years, and now it's your fault and not mine. So anyhow, the outlook, this is what I'm looking at. The outlook for inflation is just not there. I don't care how many times the Fed raises the Fed funds rate, if they do it in December, if they talk about doing it 2 times next year, if they talk about doing it 3 times next year, the 10-year Treasury is unlikely to go anywhere unless people start to perceive inflation going higher. The good news is the index of leading indicators is still strong. This is a forward-looking thing. When it goes below 0, it's pretty good about forecasting a recession. This is forecasting nothing but continued growth moving forward. To me, another huge bullish signal is just how many people in America get a job every month. Somewhere between 80,000 and 250,000 people getting a job every month. And in addition to that, the rate of change in their wages has been going up. You know, how much pay bump did you get? 2, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4. This is what a labor shortage looks like, is when finally the wages in this country, the rate of growth in wages starts getting higher. Consumer confidence blew off a chart after the election. I knew business confidence was because I saw it. I didn't expect consumer confidence to be high because I thought everybody's watching TV, and how can you possibly be optimistic if you watch TV? But the fact of the matter was consumers were just as euphoric as businesses. Household net worth in this country is now $97 trillion, never been higher. This is all part of Federal Reserve's monetary policy. The wealth effect worked. We got interest rates down to 0, and we made rich people richer, and they bought a lot of boats and stuff. Corporate profits have turned around, thank goodness, partly because of oil and gas companies minimizing their losses and going forward, and that's a bullish sign. This is the percent of small business say they're going to hire in the next 3 months. Look how that exploded right after the election. And then look at this one. I almost never use this slide. This is small businesses survey. Now's a good time to expand. What would you call that one? That's all right after the election. I would call that exploding. The euphoria in the business community was absolutely euphoric. I'm not making it up. Big companies, 36% hire, 16% say, no, we're going to lay off somebody. Bring it down to the Texas level a little bit. The Texas Index of Leading Indicators has resumed its upward trend. Texas index goes down when oil drops from $100 down to $30. There's places in this state that are impacted by a decline in oil prices, but what you can see is that decline is over. The negative impact of that decline is over, and most of that is because Houston has turned the corner. Houston is such a huge part of the overall state economy. Here's the Houston business cycle. This is not a forward indicator. This is what's known as a coincidental index. It's like, how's it doing today? The amazing thing here is that it didn't drop very much. It was weird. When oil dropped down to where it did, say $30 plus or minus, that's like lightning going off, and I kept waiting for the thunder. When are we going to have all these layoffs? And we never did. It's like a thunderstorm where you had a big lightning bolt, and you really didn't have the thunder. The city survived. It's a beast. And this is the variety. By the way, I've given NAI permission to email this to all of you if you want it, and you've got my permission to take my name off of it and put your name on it and give it at your local Rotary Club if you like. Just don't do that in San Antonio. I've been there. Job growth pretty much across the board except in oil and gas. Oil and gas is still kind of right-sizing, but the powerful drivers in this city are just overwhelming it. And the good news is our American oil and gas is winning. People ask me about hurricanes. Here's kind of the big ones. I'm going to focus on the ones from 2000 on to the future. We've had some big hurricanes, and they're tough. They're dangerous, tragic when things happen badly. I'm going to just talk about the economics of it. I do have compassion. I don't have any pets, and I really don't care about cat videos either, so I'm just going to talk about the economics of hurricanes. And here's this is the employment data for the 3 most recent hurricanes. And my conclusion here is that hurricanes don't mean a thing to Houston from an economic standpoint. I wouldn't sell a thing of real estate in Houston because they just had a hurricane. In fact, whenever you have natural disasters like this, like a flood or a fire or something like that, typically what happens is it creates an enormous buying opportunity. I don't know for a fact, but it seems to me that Houston might be probably one of the best buying opportunities in the country, and I'll tell you why. Because oil went down and people lost interest in Houston, and the Federal Reserve redlined them. I know they don't like using that term, but the fact of the matter is they told all their lenders, you better kind of stay clear of the oil and gas regions, and so people did stay clear of the oil and gas regions starting in 2014, and then we have this hurricane and all that news. I started noticing, it's like every time I watched CNN, I kept seeing exactly the same picture of Houston. It's like, it's just, that's what they do. It's propaganda. I wouldn't waste a dime thinking about hurricanes. And so if indeed some of the potential demand for Houston commercial real estate was stifled by a government that's redlining lending into oil regions like this one, then in effect, some of that price appreciation that you might have seen in Boston or San Francisco or LA, someplace like that, maybe that was capped a little bit here. I don't know for sure. I don't care if you ever buy a piece of real estate. That's not what I do for a living. I'm just trying to help you. What am I doing here? I'm hoping to give you a few pieces of information that might help you serve your customers better and help you and your family make better business decisions. That's the only reason I'm here. Why I'm still bullish about real estate is because people want to get in. I just saw this the other day. 557 new private equity funds in real estate are raising money. They're targeting another 177 billion. If you thought there was too much money chasing deals back then, 177 billion fresh coming in. And this one I wanted to call to your attention too. In that same report, they mentioned there's 247 billion in dry powder already. So if I put those two together, 247, another 117 or so, I'm getting up to 350 billion in fresh money coming in through private equity targeted to commercial real estate. And just yesterday, I saw on my news feed, I don't even remember where I was from, National Real Estate Investor Online, I'm sure it was, and the headline, which I didn't have time to read, says, pension funds upping their allocation for real estate again. So I'm still bullish on commercial real estate. So with that, I'm going to just go right to the couple of things about oil and gas. Saudi Arabia needs $96 to pay their bills. Only costs them $10 or so, maybe $5 to produce, but it costs them $96 a barrel to keep their government afloat. They do a lot of welfare, a lot of subsidies. And when oil dropped below 96, they start running into financial problems. The International Monetary Fund about 2 years ago said, Saudi Arabia, if you don't change your tax policies and your subsidy policies, you're going to be bankrupt within 5 years. And I'm thinking, is that possible? No way. Then I see this. Saudi bin Laden Group is the largest construction company in the Persian Gulf, and they haven't paid their subcontractors and suppliers for months because the Saudi government is delaying payment for completed projects. This is what you do when you're running out of money. And then I see this one in August last year, 10,000 workers from India who are working in Saudi Arabia need food, and the New Delhi is sending them food because they're starving because they're not getting paid. The good news is 2 months later in the Wall Street Journal, it said Saudi Arabia cuts $1 billion check to Saudi bin Laden, telling them to pay these workers so they could get a plane ticket and go home. That's what the problem was. This is what you do when you're running out of money, gang. So why am I telling you this? Because in my mind, the Saudi king is going to do everything that he can to keep the price of oil up till the end of next year. And why do I say the end of next year? Because they're hoping to put up for sale a 5% stake in Saudi Aramco. It's their personal owned family oil company. The king thinks it's worth $2 trillion, 5% of that be $100 billion. He needs that money. And so my hypothesis is Saudi Arabia is going to do everything possible to keep the price of oil high until that IPO happens. And if that IPO happens, then everybody's going to want to keep prices high. That will be good for Texas and for Houston. Here's what I want you to keep. Here's my black swan, is that he doesn't get the IPO and he can't fund it. And then he's sitting there going bankrupt. And all I know, gang, in my personal opinion, is that oil at $50 just doesn't work for Saudi Arabia. They go bankrupt at $50 while the people out in West Texas make 60% IRRs on those wells they got out there. And so if I'm Saudi King at $50, I'm on the road to bankruptcy. I got to try to get that up as close to $90 as I can. And just watch what happens here, because just in the last couple of days, it's starting to kind of unfold a little bit. The Kurds over there in Iraq, they're the ones that helped us get rid of ISIS. They're the tough guys. When the Iraqi army turned around and ran away, the Kurds stepped in and actually are moving out ISIS. So what's happened is the Kurds now are standing on virtually all the oil in Iraq and all the oil in Syria. And that doesn't set well with Iraq or Syria or Iran. And I don't know about Russia, but I do know for sure Turkey. The Kurds virtually have no friends. Kind of remind me of me, okay? The Kurds have no friends, but they're tough fighters, and they're occupying all the oil over there. And so if I'm a Saudi king and I need oil to go to $100, the easiest way for me would be to start a little skiff with the Kurds and have the Kurds set all the oil production on fire in Iraq and in Syria. And the price of oil would be moving much higher in a short period of time. I think that's my black swan. Black swans mean low percentage chance of happening. But I'm telling you, what I just said is real. And the logic of this is this Saudi king's got to do something. $50 oil ain't going to work. So with that said, I'm authorized here to open up for Q&A for a little bit. Does anybody have a question? Did I not talk about a topic you want me to talk about? Do you want to buy Bitcoin? Are you worried about $20 trillion in debt and want to know why I didn't mention that? Okay. All right. Go ahead, sir.
What happens in the event that there is inflation?
What happens if you get inflation in the economy? Then what happens is the 10-year Treasury goes up whether the Fed wants it to or not. It will start to reflect people's fear that inflation is going to happen in America, and the long interest rates, the one we're all interested in, is the 10-year Treasury. That will start going up. It's really interesting to watch, because since Trump got elected and he's doing all these tweet things, okay, here's what I observed, and I watch the 10-year every day. And here's what I observed. Whenever Trump acts presidential that day, the 10-year goes up, because people think, oh my gosh, this guy's going to, Mr. Fiscal Policy's back on the wrestling table. He's ready to go. And then the next day, he'll do something not presidential. And I saw this, and you want to look for it. You remember the day that he tweeted about Arnold Schwarzenegger's poor ratings on The Celebrity Apprentice? He came out and goes, hey, Arnie, you stink, man. Your ratings are nothing compared to me. The 10-year Treasury collapsed. I'm not kidding you. Go back and look and see. So what happens right now is if Trump acts presidential, people think inflation might come. If Trump acts non-presidential and does something dumb, it goes back down. If Grover Norquist and the Tea Party and the Freedom Caucus come out and say, Don, you're not doing anything by raising this deficit. You're not going to get nothing unless you pay for it. You go to NAR and get rid of that mortgage interest deduction. You go wherever you need to go to get rid of that 1031, and you tell New York and California they can't deduct. That's where we are today. And the history shows that's a tough gambit to happen. But that's what it is. If inflation starts to go up, if oil went from $50 to $70 because something goes wrong in Syria and Iraq, and it stays there for 2 or 3 years, that's a problem. If it goes up for a little while and then it goes back down, you have inflation for 1 year. And what happens when it goes from 75 back down to 55? So you have inflation that year, and then you have deflation the next year, and it washes itself out. It's a great question. Yes, sir.
So every day now, all I hear about is the bubbles coming, the burst in the market. I know you don't like to listen to it.
Yeah.
I hate listening to it also. I mean, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Question is, what about a bubble? What should we do about the bubble? I am worried about a bubble in stocks. That's why I'm 75 to 80% commercial real estate. I understand real estate, and I don't understand stocks. I don't want to own stocks. You ever heard of Michael Litt? He's that guy that shorted the market, and they made that movie about it, The Big Short. I was just on a panel, just him and me, like in Minneapolis about 5 days ago, and he was telling people in response to that question, he goes, this is nothing like 2008 at all. What I see coming down the road here is what he called a garden variety recession. There's not that financial overcooking in the marketplace. Frankly, because of government regulation. Government regulation has put their fist down on lenders. And so you don't have all of that over-lending. You don't have all of that overcapacity that we traditionally see at this late stage in the cycle. I mean, we see cranes, but nothing like what we're used to. So I personally don't see the bubble. I see I don't see it. I see a situation where prices could go up at a lower pace. And if you're in New York or Boston or somewhere, I could see a situation where your property values don't go up at all for 3 or 4 years. But that idea of a minus 40% like in commercial real estate like we saw in 2008, just not out there. Yeah. Anybody else? And keep in mind, I'm an economist, 50-50 chance I don't know what I'm talking about. You're next. Wait a minute. This way back in the back. Go ahead. Go ahead.
As far as Houston goes, and assuming you believe that at least 50% of the local economy is oil and gas based,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts on this issue of reusable energy and that impact? What is it that you think may happen to Houston as a result of that?
Okay.
In perspective
That's a good
of
question.
our real estate values. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if we switch out to another reusable source rather than oil and gas,
Yeah.
what's it do to us guys here in Houston?
Here's my gut take on this, is that the people in Houston are on the creative edge of a lot of stuff, whether it's just valves that control flows or the geology of getting into reservoirs or stuff like that. My guess is that over time, if we start to evolve away, migrate away from oil and gas into other things, I have no reason to doubt that this town will continue to dominate whatever the energy source is. I mean, the thing is, the talent in this town and the business climate in this town is what creates the activity. I mean, oil and gas probably brought them there in the first place. But I can't tell you how many people I talk to about just making valves and stuff. It's crazy. So if you need a valve and it's like 100,000 pounds and it controls Mount Rushmore, see, I'm not sure that they have any geysers in Mount Rushmore now that I think about it. Using metaphors is not a good idea. I think you get what I'm saying. I think we'll migrate. The smart people in this town will be just as smart in renewables as they are in fossil fuel too. Personally. Okay, this young man right here, and then you.
So what might cause that garden variety?
Yeah, okay, question is the garden variety. Here's how garden variety works. You wake up one morning and you ask your wife, you want to buy a car? And you go, no, we just got 2 new cars. I hate that new car smell. I'm getting sick of it. How about some new carpet? Oh, don't you remember? We just got new carpet. How about kids' phones? Well, they all got iPhone 9s, and we don't. So what are we going to buy this week? And you find out nothing. That's what a recession is all about, where you wake up one morning, everybody's bought what they need, they don't need anything else. The automotive business is right there now. The automotive business is at an absolute peak, cyclical peak. They're still selling them at record levels, but that's not going up anymore. And as they do that every year, more and more people will have a car. And at some point, when people have cars, they got phones and everything else, you just wake up one morning and it's like, I don't need to buy anything. I will. I got a job, but I just don't need anything, and all of a sudden General Motors starts laying off people. Maybe Apple starts laying off people because the production is too high. We got to cut back on production. And then you have a recession as those people get laid off, and it filters through retail and everywhere else. That's a garden variety as compared to a financial cataclysm like we saw in '08. Go ahead, sir. Thanks for your...
Would you agree that Reagan's tax cuts in the 80s really were effective? And that just in the event that we are able to have some significant tax cuts and all of the special interests, even after they compare where they are now and where they would be after the cuts, perhaps they're better off even, without the specific loopholes you say that they have. What are you thinking that the possibilities are in the event that it does happen? What do you think of our growth prospects?
Okay, if we cut taxes, it'll make people work more. And you'll get to keep more of your money, whether you're a business or an individual. And that's super bullish. Just makes people want to work more. So productivity goes up. It's good for our country. Reagan's deal, all it did was create large deficits, too. That was the downside. The upside is the tax cuts just encourage people to work a lot. So to me, if we cut taxes for individuals and cut taxes for businesses, that will create a lot more economic activity in this country. And that chart that I showed you, the expected inflation expectations of the future, that'll start nudging up a little bit until people see how's this going to work out. Yeah, it's a good thing for the country. And higher interest rates is not a bad, you get higher interest rates in a country for the most part because your economy is strong.
You don't believe in trickle-down economics, that the growth would offset the deficit issues?
Do I believe in trickle-down economics? I don't know that, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't really have a point of view on that. All I know is that when you cut taxes for people, they're likely to work harder. I know that for a fact. When Reagan cut my taxes down to 28, I've been a workaholic ever since, and that's like 30 years ago. I haven't stopped yet. Go ahead. He's kind of paying the bills here, and then you.
What about the deficit, federal deficit?
Yeah, okay. People ask me this all the time. See, here's why I don't know that we're going to get lower tax rates, because I get that question 150 times a year. How many times have I got somebody say, hey, what about these high personal tax rates? We got to get rid of those. Zero. It's 100 votes that way versus 0 votes this way. The American people are worried and scared to death about that $20 trillion tax rate. That's why I said he's got to pay for it. You either do the border adjustment or you get rid of the loopholes, because people are scared to death of that. I'm not. People ask me that all the time. It's like, hey, you didn't even mention 20 trillion. And here's why I didn't mention it, because I've done some study on that, because people ask about that all the time. Here's the thing, is that I look at Japan as the canary in the coal mine. And their we got nervous when our debt rate got to the same as our overall economy. The debt to GDP ratio was 100%. And man, sirens were going off all over America. And then I started looking at Japan. Where were they at? 100% debt to GDP? No, that would be 200% debt to GDP. Did they have inflation? Not a hint of it since the 1970s. Is their currency devaluing? No, it's getting stronger. Are their interest rates going up? No, they're near 0. So that's all I need to know personally, is if Japan's at 200% debt to GDP with no inflation, a strong currency, and low interest rates, the fact that we're at 100, my conclusion would be is I'll start really talking about that when we get up to 200%. So when we get to 35 or 40 trillion, then I would just say, well, that's where Japan was, and they couldn't get any inflation, period, either. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Mark, more on a local level, because I think that's what people really care
Yeah.
about here on the commercial end. If you're an investor, what segments of the industry do you like immediate and then long term?
Yeah, okay. Number one, I'm super conservative. And so I like wingtip shoes. And my Dodge minivan is right out there in the parking lot. I've been driving minivans since the 80s. some kid tried to sell me some clothes and goes, dude, you're a dinosaur. And I said, you got that right, pal. I specialize in dinosaurs. So I'm about as risk averse as you can get. But a young guy in private equity asked me that question about a year ago, and I thought about it because he wanted to know. And here's mine. And that would be, I would call it the bulletproof Class B apartment fund. Because Class B and C apartments is the only property type I know that has negative supply. People are knocking it down, putting something else on it, or people are fixing it up and putting too much stainless steel in it and making it go from a B to B plus or whatever. So I'm a big fan of Class B and C multifamily for me. And the bulletproof part of it is that I don't want too high leverage. I don't need the double digit. I'm not the guy that you got to talk to me about getting 20% IRRs. I'm happy with a 7. And so if you can give me 7 to 10, here's how I want the leverage. I'd like to see the spreadsheet where if we got into a garden variety recession that was kind of a strong garden and we had to cut rent by 10%, and our vacancy went from like 5% to 9%, even though we cut rent that much, I don't want to lose my building. Put as much leverage as you can, 60%, 65%, I don't know what the number is. But I want to be in a position with my building that we can cut rent by 10% and we can take a 9 or 10% vacancy for a couple of years and not lose the building. Because I don't want somebody else calling my lender and buying my loan from me and then making all the money on the next upside of the cycle. I'm pretty strong personally on industrial too. I just don't, I just haven't had an opportunity. Like most of my money, like I said, with TICREF and 403B. So I just invest in whatever they invest in, and they just bought the big shopping mall out in Vegas, which like, oh my gosh, the fashion center or whatever. It's like, I saw that, I thought, that's not something I'm really interested in owning. But when you got 19 billion and another billion came in, it's an easy way to write a check for $1 billion to just like one property. So anyhow, it's a good question. What do we think? How's our time? Oh, it's good. It's time to quit. Thank you a lot for your kind attention, and I appreciate you inviting me to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dotzour, and your beautiful wife for coming tonight. You have such a talent for taking things that are extremely difficult to understand for a lot of people and putting it through a professional lens of sarcasm that makes it very entertaining. So we enjoyed that very much. On behalf of NAI, I'd like to thank our sponsor, our clients, and we really appreciate y'all coming out tonight. And please make your way to the bar for the second half of our networking, and look forward to meeting each and every one of you. And here's to a great 2018.